This is the Porsche Taycan 4S, the cheaper entry-level version of Porsche's new all-electric sports car. It follows in the footsteps of the Taycan Turbo and the Taycan Turbo S, and while it looks pretty similar, there are some big differences between this, the poor man's Taycan, and the all-singing, all-dancing big boys.
First up is the price. The Taycan Turbo and Turbo S cost £115,000 and £138,000 respectively. The new 4S comes in two versions, Performance Battery and Performance Battery Plus. The cheaper of the two cars cost £83,000, the same price as an entry-level Porsche 911. Both versions have a smaller, less powerful rear motor. The 4S does without the active rear steer on the Turbo S, although it is an option. It gets smaller 19-inch wheels and steel brakes instead of carbon ceramics, and some slightly different electrical bits, including a different inverter. But how does this affect the driving experience? And does the lower price mean the Taycan 4S is less fun than the Turbos?
Nope. It might be a fraction of the price, but it's definitely not a fraction of the fun. Electric cars are meant to be boring, a little bit soulless, or at least that's what people tell me. Porsche clearly missed that memo. This thing's hilarious. The 4S has a lot less power than the big boy Taycans. The Turbo has damn near 700, and the Turbo S has damn near 800 horsepower. While the 4S, depending on which version you go for, will either have 530 or around 570 horsepower. But even though there is a big difference, anyone who complains about their car only having 570 horsepower clearly needs their head examined.
The eagle-eyed amongst you will have seen that I'm not driving on a road. That's the black stuff normally under the car.
Woo!
Nope, today I'm driving on white stuff. Snow and ice somewhere on a frozen swamp in Lapland.
Backwards entry for the win. And it's a great test because actually out here, you can figure out exactly how playful this car is. Out on the public roads, cars like these, because they're basically supercars, they have so much power, so getting anywhere near the limit is damn near impossible. But here, where the traction's quite restricted, you can figure out exactly what the car wants to do when it's on the limit, figure out what the dynamics are, just have a laugh. And I tell you what, this thing is about as playful as it gets, really. You can pitch it into a corner, send a little bit of power to the rear wheels, and just maintain the slide, and it is genuinely balletic. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. Porsche really know a thing or two about how to make sports cars handle, but this exceeds my expectations.
That playfulness comes from some serious systems. Porsche torque vectoring uses an electronic diff lock on the rear axle to send more torque to the outside wheel for better turn-in, or locking the diff to help accelerate out of corners. A new 4D chassis control system allows all the Taycan's chassis technologies to work together more cohesively, providing a coordinated response from the air suspension, brakes, optional rear wheel steering, and dynamic chassis control systems.
You can tell they've lavished this thing with every ounce of their expertise in making a car handle really well. And even though it is an electric car, it's got soul. It really has.
So, they've managed to drop the price without dropping the fun. But have they dropped the quality? Well, some compromises have been made. The 4S comes with smaller 19-inch wheels as standard, steel brakes instead of carbon ceramics. It also does without a few of the features seen in the Turbo S, but most of these, torque vectoring, rear wheel steering, traction management, chassis control, are available as options if you want to spend the cash. But whether you do or you don't, you still get a cabin that is noticeably nicer than its main rivals.
The interior is really lovely, actually. What dominates the interior is the sheer number of digital screens inside the cabin. You've got a curved display in front of you which shows things like your speed, your state of charge, and of course your map data. Then you've got a choice of either one or two infotainment displays, one for you and one for your passenger, and a separate display which controls all your climate control settings. You've also got a really good amount of storage space. You've got good sized door bins, a couple of cup holders, and a dedicated storage area underneath the center console. There's even a good amount of space around the back.
The Taycan is a really usable, practical car. It'll happily accommodate 4 6-foot grown-ups, and there's good leg room around the back, but headroom is a little bit tight due to the fact that it has a sloping roofline and a huge glass sunroof. Storage is good too. You have a front trunk big enough for a small carry-on size suitcase, and a boot around as big as you'd get in a hatchback. Ultimately then, the Taycan isn't an impractical toy you use for weekends. It's genuinely something you could live with on a daily basis.
So we know this thing's fun when you're skidding around Father Christmas's backyard, but what's it like on a proper road? Well, I've got no idea. This is Lapland in the middle of winter, and there are no proper roads. Everything is covered in snow. What I can tell you is that the Taycan 4S is actually pretty good in a straight line. There are two versions. There's a performance battery and a performance battery plus, and they have different power outputs. They both do 0 to 60 in 4 seconds dead, but the Performance Battery Plus will do 0 to 124 around half a second quicker. That's the version to get if you're into fast cars. The 4S is nowhere near as quick as the Turbo S. The Turbo S will do 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds and will do 0 to 124 in around 3 to 3.5 seconds quicker than the 4S. Mental.
But whichever way you look at it, the 4S is extremely quick. Launch control, standard on all Taycan models, is always an event. Even on snow and ice, on ordinary unstudded winter tires, it pulls like a train, and repeatedly with no loss of power. It's most definitely built for performance.
The ride is pretty interesting. All Taycans come with air suspension, but if you're thinking it's going to ride like a floaty SUV, then you got another thing coming. It actually feels very much like a sports car. It's quite a firm ride, and that might be something to do with the fact that I'm driving around on snow right now, and also to do with the fact that this has the optional 20-inch wheels. So at the moment, it's a little bit jiggly, and I'm gonna reserve judgment about the ride comfort for when I get to drive this thing on proper roads. As for quietness, well, there's a perception that electric cars are completely silent, but that's not the case with the Taycan, because you have the option of electric sport sound. And what that does is it allows the car to sound a little bit space age. You floor it, and it sounds like you're in some kind of alien spaceship. Of course, there's the option to switch that off and go into a much quieter mode, but if you want your car to make some kind of noise, then at least you've got that facility. Obviously, range is going to be really important. This is an electric car, and there are two options. The standard cheaper car will give you a range of 407 kilometers, while the Performance Battery Plus will give you up to 473 kilometers on a single charge. That's the one to go for if you're worried about range.
If you're worried about recharge times, well, that's still a legit concern. But with an 11 kilowatt home charger, you can top up overnight in 9 hours. If you can find one, then at an 800 volt charging station, the Taycan can accept 270 kilowatts maximum charging power, which can allow charging from 5% to 80% in 22.5 minutes.
All things considered, Porsche have played an absolute blinder with the Taycan. They've done it perfectly. Bring out the top model, get the early adopters on board, and then get the poor people wishing they made a cheaper one. Then bring out a cheaper one that's 90% as good as the Turbo S. This thing is absolutely mega. I can't say enough kind things about it. It is a brilliant car to drive. It looks sensational. It's got a fabulous amount of kit. And at the end of the day, I think this might actually be the most desirable Porsche, bar none.
Price aside, it might also be the most desirable, most engaging, most aspirational electric car, full stop. Petrol, diesel, your days are numbered. Game on.